千里之行，始于足下。A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together.
So here's chapter 24. It's divided into 9 lines, and we were able to group them into different sections. So from last time, here's what we did. We have the first 2 lines as a couplet about a physical position, tiptoes, straddling, being used to imply one's behavior in life, where tiptoeing would be an attempt to raise oneself above other people, and straddling would be with the legs wide apart to take up more space to attract attention. So these are all linked to egocentric behaviors. In the second section, Lao Tzu gets much more specific and names 4 specific ways that the ego manifestation can be like. Those who flaunt, those who presume, those who praise themselves, those who boast about themselves. So this is good. This is the central part of this chapter. As you can see, the 4 lines, they are the most important parts of this particular chapter. And then section 3 is the commentary on that, saying that those with the Tao call such things leftover food or tumors, meaning that these are unnecessary, these are to be discarded, these are to be let go. And Lao Tzu minces no words, saying that those with the Tao despise them. Not just dislike or find them distasteful. Those would be a little bit too light for Lao Tzu's opinion. So his thoughts, the third character in line 8. So you may recall that I said the conventional Mandarin pronunciation is Now it can be used as a verb. As a noun means evil, malicious, malevolent. But when you use it as a verb, in traditional Chinese, it sounds different. It's 恶. And it means an intense kind of dislike, a loathing, a hatred. So 恶 will be the correct pronunciation here. So the last line talks about those who possess the Tao do not engage in them. The important thing here, if you look at the difference between line 7 and line 9, notice that in line 7, it says those with the Tao. Line 9 says those who possess the Tao. So this is because in line 7, if you look at the second and third characters there, that's at the Tao, with the Tao. And then the second and third character in line 9, that's to possess the Tao, to have the Tao, which means to master the Tao. So in line 7, it's the actual characters depict someone who's on the path of learning to perfect their own practice in the Tao, in Tao cultivation. Whereas line 9 is talking about someone who has the Tao or someone who has mastered the Tao. You can think of it either way. So think of line 7 as Tao cultivators and line 9 as more in tune with the Tao masters. Either way, in line 7, people start out as they're learning the Tao, they learn to really not like arrogance or the ego, and they practice to reduce that within themselves. When you are finally at the level of Tao mastery, line 9, you are able to let go of that intense hatred because it is no longer a part of you to engage in arrogant behavior. So that's the conclusion that we talked about last time. This time, what I want to do is to go deeper into the four most important lies in the center. The flaunting, the presuming, the praising, the boasting. It turns out that there is a little bit more in each one that we can get into. So without further ado, let's dive right into them. Quite a few things to talk about. So line 3 says, those who flaunt themselves are not clear. So you may recall from last time, I talked about two possible interpretations. That one interpretation is that those who flaunt themselves are not clear about the Tao or not clear about life. They're far from enlightenment is the idea. And in that interpretation, they just don't understand. They just don't get it. The other interpretation, the one that I favor, is that those who flaunt themselves, they want to be seen clearly. They want to put themselves on a pedestal. They want to hog the spotlight. They want to draw attention. They want to be looked at. But ironically, because of the Tao, it always works out that they achieve the opposite of what they're looking for. They want to be seen more clearly. They end up not seeing clearly at all. So here, I want to focus on the egocentric behavior of flaunting and dig a little bit deeper into it. I think you will find it interesting. So there's a couple of symptoms associated with the behavior of flaunting. So people who flaunt usually have a high regard for themselves, that they have a high opinion of what they are capable of. And what you will notice is that these high opinions are usually completely out of proportion with their actual abilities, with the actual quality of their work. So they have this overinflated opinion of who they are, how they are, and what they do. Because of that, the secondary symptom of those who flaunt themselves is that they tend to think of themselves as indispensable. That, for instance, in the workplace setting, they will think that quite naturally, the company cannot do without me. So in a community or engaged in some sort of activity, perhaps with their friends, they will think of themselves also as being indispensable. And this is all stemming from that high regard for themselves. So when you spot someone like that, people who think of themselves way too highly or think of themselves as indispensable for a particular enterprise, then you will know that they fit the description of line number 3. So those are the primary symptoms I want to get into this time, and I also want to talk about the cure. So Tao cultivators see this kind of egocentric behavior as deplorable, as despicable. So they loathe, they hate it. So what is the cure? Well, Tao cultivators, in context of flaunting, they have a much clearer view of themselves. They also understand their importance in the world. Now, the understanding here, I want to emphasize that the understanding of importance, of one's self-importance, is not cut and dry. It's not, I'm very important or I'm unimportant. It's dependent on the context in which you speak. So you can be very important to your family, but to your employer, Well, you can be a quote-unquote important employee, but you are probably not as important to your company as you are to your family, relatively speaking. So it's a complex issue with many different levels of importance depending on what we're talking about. Now, of course, those who flaunt feel that they are important to everyone, everywhere, at all times. Tao cultivators realize that they are important to some, but not so important to others. It just all depends. So let me get more specific on that. So first of all, Tao cultivators, as students of humanity, as students of the human mind, study psychology or have an understanding of psychology, even if they don't actively study it. So they know about some of the different terms. They may not know what those terms are, but they recognize the effect. So I'm about to introduce a couple of different terms. Of course, in a Tao discussion, it is important for us to speak plainly. Therefore, my presentation is not going to be lost in a sea of specialized terms. I only want to introduce the terms enough to get everyone a flavor of what we're talking about here. So here's the first bullet item. Tao cultivators know all about the Dunning-Kruger effect and the imposter syndrome. So I do realize that not everyone knows what these terms mean. And at the same time, I also know that we have very highly intelligent and highly knowledgeable individuals who are joining us for the Tao meeting. So if you do recognize these terms, if you do know what they are, my standing invitation for you is to just go ahead and type out, a few sentences signaling your understanding and perhaps explain it in your own way. And I'm about to do the same. I'm about to explain what these terms are and why they are connected to this particular line from the Tao Te Ching. So let's start with the first one, the Dunning-Kruger, specifically the Dunning-Kruger effect. What is that? So it's a term that has become more widely used recently. I was a little surprised by this. I've known about this term for quite some time, but recently I keep coming across it in news reports, news articles. So I figure this must be something that people are beginning to be aware of. So I wanted to be the first to bring it up. So the effect, what it specifically means is that those with cognitive deficit, and that just means those who don't know enough, possibly because they don't have the ability to know more, or possibly because they've never been exposed to the appropriate level of knowledge for what they need to know. So cognitive deficit is someone who doesn't know, and this could be ignorance or the lack of ability to learn. Cognitive deficit fails to recognize itself. When you are cognitively in deficit, you don't have enough cognitive ability to think, to know, or to recognize that you are insufficient in that regard. So the plain spoken way to talk about it is to be too ignorant to understand that you are ignorant. And this happens a lot in life. And it's especially becoming exposed in recent times, that people who don't really know that much about the world are being exposed, and they have no idea. They're willfully ignorant. They don't really want to increase what they know. They don't really want to question what they think of is true. They don't even have the first step, which is to realize that they don't know enough. So this is opposed to the Tao. This is contrary to the Tao, to be too ignorant to understand ignorance. There's actually a couple of Tao references that I will give out in just a little bit, and it plays into, it's connected deeply into 24 of the Tao Te Ching. This term, Dunning-Kruger, came about because years ago, social psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger wrote about it. So the year was 2011, and they talked about the research into people who exhibit this behavior, who exhibit a complete lack of interest in changing it. They don't even realize that they need to change it. So ever since that time, it's been dubbed the Dunning-Kruger effect. And today, the term is more and more increasingly used to describe entire groups of voters in the electorate. These will be the people who are not informed. These will be the people who hang on to certain opinions, and there's nothing that you can really do to change it. Now, I'm more interested in what we can do for ourselves as we cultivate the Tao, rather than what we can do to change other people. So how do we watch for ignorance in ourselves? What is the cure? Well, the cure can be found in the Tao of knowing what you know and what you do not know. This is the cure for that desire or need to flaunt. When you have the need to flaunt, you want to show how much you know, you want to showcase yourself as a know-it-all, but then you end up exposed as someone who knows not enough. So that is the deeper level I'm talking about when it comes to the Tao. It's connected to another chapter in the Tao Te Ching, chapter 71. Let me show you what that chapter looks like. This is a chapter that many of you have listened to me talk about. We went over this chapter some time ago, line by line. So you may still recall. If you focus on the first two lines, you'll see that this particular social psychological effect was actually talked about by Lao Tzu more than 2,500 years ago. So this was part of the Tao from thousands of years ago, literally. So in 71, line 1 says, to know that you do not know is highest. This would be the opposite of the Dunning-Kruger effect. The Dunning-Kruger effect is to have no idea that you do not know. The opposite of that is in accordance with the Tao, as you see in line 1, to know that you do not know. Because when you understand, when you realize that there are gaps in your knowledge, you will proactively motivate yourself to seek out ways to fill the gap in your knowledge. And therefore, that is the highest, that is the best, that is in accordance with the Tao. So then line 2 is exactly the ancient Chinese description of the Dunning-Kruger effect, which, as I mentioned, is first coined in 2011. So probably people don't realize that even way before that, 2,500 years before that, it was already described in the Tao Te Ching in line 2. To not know, but think you know, is flawed. Today, we see that it can be deeply flawed, that one's thinking can be deeply flawed when you don't really know, but then you think you know. You presume that you are correct. You presume that you have knowledge. You presume that you know. Now, this goes on. We don't need to go through the entire chapter. Line 3, we'll stop ourselves at line 3. And in a moment, we will come to sort of a logical stopping point on this. But line 3 says, 夫为病病, only when one recognizes the fault as a fault. When you realize that there is a shortcoming within yourself, that is when you can take action to address to remedy that shortcoming, whatever that may be. This is now also the opposite of the Dunning-Kruger effect. So if you heard the previous presentation on 71, then you know that the repeating characters bing, bing, where bing, the last two characters, where bing means illness or sickness. This is one of the most mistranslated lines in the Tao Te Ching, where people will usually depict it as the sages are sick of being sick. And that's exactly not what the original says. The original does not say that at all. The original is addressing this Dunning-Kruger effect that we're talking about, is saying that you must recognize a defect as a defect. If you have that defect or a fault of ignorance, but then you are too ignorant to know that, then that's a major defect or a major fault. So awareness is the bottom line. To realize that you have a problem is the bottom line. Okay, so one more social psychological manifestation to talk about. So that was the Dunning-Kruger effect. You probably did not realize that it was connected to the Tao in that particular way, but it definitely is. And when you come across it again, you will know. Now, let's also talk about the imposter syndrome. What is that? So from the Tao perspective, it's the other extreme, away from the Dunning-Kruger effect or away from this idea of not knowing, but then think that you know. This is the other extreme, where the manifestation is that you really do have the ability or the knowledge or the expertise or the competence, but you doubt yourself. But you think that you got where you are by luck, that it was a mistake, that you're fraudulent, and any day now you will be discovered as a fraud. So that's the imposter syndrome. It actually, here's the way that I express it. It means doubting yourself despite external evidence of competence. So the Dunning-Kruger effect that we talked about, that's one extreme, that's bad. This is the other extreme, also bad. The Tao is somewhere in the middle, and I can, later on, there's a quote that I want to analyze and break down for you that will tell you exactly what the Tao is, and it's going to come from a source that I know many people who study the Tao will find surprising. So let's stay with the imposter syndrome for now. How prevalent is it? Well, it turns out that the more intelligent you are, the worse the imposter syndrome hits. So I do know that we have quite a few intelligent people in our group. So this may be something that you have experience with as well. So let me talk about how prevalent exactly. You know, I can use terms like quite prevalent, but that doesn't really give you a good idea. So there's an author who is becoming a well-known speaker as well for the research that she has done in human psychology, motivation, etc. She's a sought-after speaker now and also consultant to Fortune 500. So her name is Olivia. Olivia has given talks everywhere to express her insights. And she has a lot of insights on human interactions, on the magic of charisma, and also she talks about the imposter syndrome. So let me relate to you one of the things she says about this particular extreme. Remember, this is when you veer away from the Tao and you are not centered or balanced anymore. You really do have some knowledge, but you doubt yourself. So she says that she's invited to speak at Ivy League colleges, universities all the time, MIT, Harvard, Stanford, etc. So specifically at Stanford, she goes there to speak with the incoming freshman class at Stanford. So these are some of the brightest students in the country that are able to get into Stanford. So when she speaks to this large group of incoming Stanford freshmen, she'll ask them the question. She'll say, okay, imposter syndrome, how many people here, the incoming class, how many people have this fear that they are the one mistake that was made by the admission committee, that they got into Stanford by mistake? Lo and behold, 2/3 of the people raise their hands. So, like I said, these are some of the brightest students in the country, but the more intelligent you are, the worse the imposter syndrome hits. So now the cure can also be found in the Tao, in the Tao of knowing what you know and do not know. So we'll talk more about this later. Okay, everybody, the time is now 11:33. Time for us to resume our discussion of the Tao Te Ching. So what we left off was about the Dunning-Kruger effect and the imposter syndrome. I also want to touch on this whole idea that those who flaunt think that because they are so good, such a gift to humanity, that they are, of course, indispensable to everybody. So I want to address that head on and point out the cure of the Tao cultivators. So unlike the people who do not understand the Tao, Tao cultivators know that they may be indispensable to their loved ones, to their family, but not necessarily to society. And this is true no matter how talented there may be. So the more you live, the more you observe the ebb and flow of life, how things change, how people come and go, how talented people are here one day, gone the next, and replaced by someone else, the more you see that, the more you realize it is very true that no one is indispensable to society as a whole. Now, I did not always understand this. I used to think of certain people as indispensable, certain extremely talented people in entertainment. So I'll pull up some names that I know a lot of people won't recognize, but I'll just explain what they are. This is just a chronicle of what I have gone through personally. So when I was a teenager, I listened to a lot of heavy metal. People are surprised by that, but this is true. Huge amount of heavy metal, and I knew that my favorite band and indeed my favorite vocalist was someone who was extremely talented, recognized in and out of that musical genre as being very gifted. So I thought that he could never be replaced. And it was a shock one day when news came out that the lead singer was leaving the band, that he was going to go off on his own. So I thought, well, this band would never be the same without the lead singer, because he was so iconic, so representative of the height of that particular music genre. Now, years passed, and the band found a replacement for the singer. And I thought, what? That's impossible. How can that be? I figure he can never be replaced. He is indispensable. Now, out of curiosity, I listened to the new singer, and I had to admit to myself, he is really good. This is another amazing, incredible talent with powerful vocals. He didn't sound exactly like the previous lead singer, but that was okay. He had his own style, and it was all very suitable for that particular kind of music. So what am I talking about? The singer who left was Rob Halford of Judas Priest, and the vocalist who replaced him was Tim Owens. And there they are. They look nothing alike. They don't sound alike, but they both sound fantastic. And this was the first challenge in my mind that, the truly talented people like, Rob Halford can never be replaced. Wrong. He was replaced for several years. So for several years, Tim Owens picked up the slack, did a very credible job as the lead singer for that group until eventually that band made peace with Rob Halford, and he came back to pick up where he left off and resumed his duty as the front man for that band. So nevertheless, it was definitely established in my mind that perhaps there are exceptions to the rule that no one can ever be replaced. So I continued to pay attention, and then I saw another replacement. This one is a different band, no longer heavy metal, but another one of my favorite bands from teenage years, an iconic band, a rock band. So not heavy metal, but hard rock. And the lead singer, again, iconic voice, unmistakable voice. His voice to me represented that band. There were other lead singers before him fronting that particular band, but they never made it big until he came around, and then they became superstars. So he left, never came back, no plans of coming back. And I thought that was it. That was it for that particular band. It will exist only in my memories. Lo and behold, they found a replacement. And again, curiosity got me to check out the way they sound. And again, I was impressed. Wow, amazing pipes, amazing voice. The band that I'm talking about is Journey. The lead singer, Steve Perry, left that band. And this will be the one that everybody thinks, not just me, but everyone would think and agree that, oh yeah, Steve Perry, he can never be replaced. Well, except he was replaced. He was replaced by a gifted vocalist by the name of Arnel Pineda. So here we have images of the before and after with Steve on the left, Arnel on the right. So they sound similar, but not exactly the same. And they don't have to sound exactly the same. Their vocals fit the hard rocking music of Journey perfectly. So I have to admit, another instance where someone that I thought was indispensable turns out not to be. Much more recently, I saw a couple more examples, so I'll just kind of run through them quickly. I think you will know what I mean. There's another one, Freddie Mercury, iconic, without question. So after he passed away, they wanted to make a documentary type of film. It turns out to be more biographical with, liberties taken for the sake of dramatic effect. But they wanted to make a movie about Freddie Mercury. But who can possibly step into his position? He's so unique, as a frontman for Queen, the rock group, that who can ever take that role? Well, the solution came in the form of an actor, Rami Malek, who ended up, doing a very convincing job of conveying the physicality of Freddie Mercury, his looks, his mannerism, expressions. Now, Malek was not a vocalist at all. But they did find someone, Mark Martel, who an amazing vocalist in his own right, who ended up providing all the vocals for that particular movie. And it's amazing. If you have seen that movie, if you are a fan of Queen or have heard their music before, I think you would agree with me that what they did, that was not Freddie Mercury, but it was really good. It was phenomenal. It was fantastic. So again, the loss of someone like Freddie Mercury is definitely keenly felt by everyone, but they are able to get around that loss when they need to make a movie. I was reminded of this recently when I was reminded of Freddie Mercury recently when I saw another movie, another biographical movie about yet another entertainer. This one still living, and that's Elton John. So yes, there's a movie out about the life of Elton John. The name of the movie is called Rocket Man, and Rocket Man is of course one of the most beloved songs created by Elton John. So Taron Egerton is the star that plays him, and even more amazing to me than uh, Bohemian Rhapsody, the movie about Freddie Mercury, even more amazing is that in this case, the actor not only plays the younger version of Elton John, but he also sings all of the songs. Totally amazing. So, for examples, I think that's enough to make my point that no one is indispensable. All of these people I would have thought before were indispensable, but they're not, as you can see. So I want to ask everyone to think of this as just one view into the Tao and apply it all around so that it's not just in the music field. It just so happens that I have these examples that I wanted to, that I think a lot of people recognize, and therefore I use them to make my point. But I want everyone to go well beyond that, to apply these examples much more widely to the world at large. So think about someone who's taken up a leading position in a company or an organization. Indeed, a leading position anywhere. So you may think of them as extremely important. Yes, that may be true, but now the Tao is saying they're important and yet not indispensable. They can be replaced. After they are gone, the world continues to move on. Then what I'd like everyone to do is to apply that back to the self. So we may have pretty high opinions of ourselves. We may think of ourselves as being very indispensable, but the reality is the Tao has proven again and again that you may be indispensable to your family, but not to society. So keeping that in mind, I think will help tremendously in tamping down or moderating the role of the ego, that it can help keep the ego in check. So arrogance will never get out of control, knowing that any one of us can be replaced. So the flaunting part, I think we've explored that pretty deeply. Now I want to talk about line 4 and line 6. Those who presume themselves are not distinguished. Presume may be that this person presumes that he is correct and is imposing that quote unquote correct opinion on everyone else. So this person probably wants to show everybody how much they know. They are the know-it-all. They want to distinguish themselves to be seen as truly knowledgeable. But usually the opposite happens, from know-it-all to know nothing. Now, it's the same. I highlight both 4 and 6 because there's a connection between the two. Those who boast about themselves do not last. Those who are boasting about themselves also feel that they have more than other people. Those who presume themselves think that they have more knowledge or better knowledge than other people. Those who boast about themselves think that they have more power, more ability than other people. So they sort of like, in the way that I think of it, they fall under a similar category. So let's explore the symptoms. To state simply, those who think they are more right, more correct, or more powerful than other people, they usually want to prove it in various ways. So you can definitely tell, you can definitely recognize the people who presume themselves. These are the people who are constantly challenging other people to a debate. And they want to do that because they want to prove how right they are. So it's the same with those who think that they are more powerful. So you may, for instance, see this in aggressive people who want to pick a fight. They want to pick a fight to prove how strong and fast they are, how much of a better fighter they are than other people. So fighting is the way to prove that. So both of these are different ways to manifest the same out of control ego. What is the cure? Well, one of them, about the fighting and the arguing, it's the non-contention part of the puzzle. And what about the other part, the people who think that they are more right, more correct, more powerful in their knowledge than other people? Well, Tao cultivators also focus on self-knowledge. They want to make sure they know what they know without having the necessity, feeling the need, I should say, to impose what they know or their opinions and thoughts and perspectives onto other people. And that's part of the self-knowledge as well. The more confident you are, the less of a need you feel that you need to prove yourself by defeating someone else in a debate. So to talk about that, I have seen Tao masters use various examples. So previously, I have spoken many times about the negativity of engaging in debates. I definitely was not able to make as convincing a case as the Tao masters could just by telling a simple little, fun little story. It's a story called The Lion and the Cub. So here I have the lion and an adorable cub. Our story opens as the mighty lion, the king of the jungle, is out walking in the wilderness with his son, the cub. As they are walking around, they notice in the distance that there's a mad dog on the loose. The mad dog looks horrible. It looks like it's in really bad shape. It's got this crazed look in its eyes. It's growling at everybody. It's acting aggressively. It's lashing out this way and that. It's frothing, foaming at the mouth. It's got its spittle everywhere. Looks horrible. So the lion sees this, and rather than to get closer to the mad dog, he turns in his direction, he veers off, takes a different route away from confrontation with the mad dog. He's giving the mad dog a wide berth. This puzzles the cub, his son. So the cub follows the lion until could no longer contain his curiosity, and he said, Dad, wait, you're the king of the jungle, right? Dad, you fight tigers and panthers all the time. You defeat them all the time. So what are you doing? Why are you veering away from the mad dog? How come you see the mad dog and you turn to avoid it? How shameful. The lion, Daddy Lion, is unperturbed and says, well, son, let me ask you a question. He continues to walk. As he's asking the question, he says, tell me, is there any glory to be had when you defeat a mad dog? Especially that one? I mean, take another look at him. Look at him. So the cub says, no, no glory. Not at all. Not at all. And then the lion says, so think about this for a moment. What if you fight the lion, you fight the mad dog, and in the course of defeating the mad dog, it gets a chance, one way or another, it gets some kind of chance to take a bite out of you. How would you feel? So the cub tries to imagine such a scenario and had to admit, he says, oh, Dad, that would really suck. So Daddy Lion says, if that is the case, son, then tell me, why should we bother to stir up trouble and create problems for ourselves by picking a fight with the mad dog? And the cub says, oh, I get it now, Dad. And they continue to walk away from the mad dog. So I hope you can see how the story bears upon the non-contention principle of the Tao. So many people who do not understand the Tao are so eager to prove themselves all the time, often by challenging others, getting into conflicts. They think that if they prevail, then it means some kind of validation. But here's the problem. The need to prove oneself comes from a deep-seated feeling of inadequacy. So validation is never quite enough, and it never lasts. Before too long, these people feel the need again to prove themselves by challenging others, getting into conflicts. So that's not the Tao. What is the Tao? Well, first of all, let's recognize that those who possess more intelligence than wisdom, those are the ones who are always trying to prove how smart they are. So think about that for a moment. They possess more intelligence, but not necessarily wisdom, so they want to prove how smart they are. What about the Tao? What about Tao cultivators? Well, those who possess intelligence as well as wisdom don't feel the need at all to prove themselves. They never argue with the mad dog, and the mad dog are the people who are levels and levels below them. Just like the lion choosing not to engage with the mad dog for all the reasons in the world, they have plenty of reasons why they would want to avoid mad dogs in real life. The people who, for instance, are talking conspiracy theories, the people with such uninformed opinions about the world that right off the bat, you know that A, you can never convince them, and B, if you actually convince them of something different than what they already believe, rather than to thank you, they will resent you. They resent you for showing them their own inadequacy. Man, they will probably even hate you. So here's the bottom line. If you see mad dogs in your life, and have you seen mad dogs in your life? I have. The realization from the Tao is that the mad dogs can never be worthy opponents for you, because you are the Tao cultivator, you are the king of the jungle, you are the lion. The more you develop yourself, the more you develop your intellect, the less you feel the need to debate or argue. So it will be best to just smile. Give mad dogs a wide berth, like the lion. Go around them, avoid them. Remember, number one, there's no need to stir up trouble for yourself. Why even do that? Number two, no need as well to create problems that don't exist right now, but if you stir up trouble, you will create problems. And number three, no need to open up the possibility of getting yourself injured, intentionally or otherwise, because it's going to be for little or no reason. So next time someone challenges you to some kind of debate, remember the lion, the cub, and the mad dog. So that's the non-contention part. I think, as you can see, Tao masters tend to be very effective at letting people know that they should not get into all that. It's just not necessary. It's such a bad idea. So I think you, the cub, can definitely see that for yourself. So let's move on. There's another part to all of this, not just non-contention, but also self-knowledge. This is related to the chapter 71 we were just talking about, that if you know that you do not know, that's the highest. But if you don't know and you are unaware of it, well, that's a problem. So this is something that ancient Tao sages had studied at length. It goes back not just 2,500 years ago, but way before that to the grand tradition of the Tao that go back thousands of years, way before Lao Tzu. So I want to expose you to one particular saying from that. 知之为知之，不知为不知，是知也。Who said that? Confucius. So let me explain what this means. First of all, you can see that there's a whole bunch of repeating characters. So you can see this character here is repeated here, in the second line here, and in the third line here. 知 means to know or knowledge. So what this says is that if you know something and you know that you know it, that's the first line. The second line is if you don't know something and you realize that you don't know it. 不知, 不 means no. So 不知 is to not know something. So if you realize your own ignorance, you don't pretend to know something that you don't really know. You just, I don't know. I would love to learn, but I don't know. If you are able to do these simple things, simple to talk about, hard to do because of the ego, then 是知也. That is the real knowing. That is the real knowledge. Said by Confucius. Let me give you guys the common translation. This is a translation that you can find pretty much anywhere. The translation says, Real knowledge is to know the extent of one's ignorance. Right off the bat, just by using the common translation, you can see the correspondence between that and the words of Lao Tzu. So this is because Confucius and Lao Tzu, they both study from the common core of Tao teachings. They're actually not at odds. They're actually not in contention with one another. There is this imaginary conflict between Confucian teachings and Tao teachings that's mostly manufactured by modern day academics. It's not true. It's not real. Let me give you the literal translation so you can see exactly what this line is trying to say. So here's the literal rendition. The first line, treat what you know as what you know. This is a description of confidence, of someone who really knows what he or she is doing, what he or she really knows. Confidence, yep, got it, I got this. Treat what you do not know as what you do not know. No pretending that you know something that you actually don't or not sure about. This is the real knowing. Or another good translation is that this is the real wisdom. This goes beyond just knowing something. This goes to the realm of wisdom. To know that you do know, and you are confident and self-assured about that, but then you're also confident enough to have the strength to admit when you don't know something. Don't know, love to learn. That is the real wisdom. Comes from Confucius, but more than that, comes from the same common core of Tao teachings. So that's all I want to talk about when it comes to those 2 points. The presumption, those who presume that they are correct, and boasting, those who boast or brag about how powerful they are. If you recall that those would correspond to line 4 and line 6. So this leaves only one last point, one last aspect of arrogance or egocentric behavior, ego manifestations, and that's line 5. Those who praise themselves have no merit. Let's dig into that. Let's go deeper into that. Okay, symptoms. Those who praise themselves are also susceptible to praise from others. So last time, I talked about how Tao cultivators realize that praising oneself is never as good as other people praising you. You praising yourself, you open up yourself automatically to skepticism. People are saying, well, you're just saying that about yourself because you're arrogant. But if other people talk about you in positive terms, then that's more real. That carries more weight than your own words. I think that's easy to understand. Okay, that was a good point for last time. But there's actually more to the Tao than that. What do I mean by susceptible to praise from others? Well, it's because the praise from others, while it does carry more weight than self-praise, the praise from others may not be true. A Tao cultivator goes beyond avoiding self-praise and goes to the level of being able to handle praise from others correctly. So there are going to be times when the praise from others carries an agenda. That is why you have to learn to handle that kind of praise in the proper way. So to illustrate this point, I actually have another story that I would like to share with you. So this one is a little bit longer than the lion and the cub, which is one of the stories that I really like, because because it's very short and to the point. This one, though, this one is a story that's actually a historical account that this actually occurred. There was someone like that. There was someone exactly with that name once walked the earth, said those things, did the things described in the story. And we're talking about the Warring States. The Warring States period is also around 2,500 years ago in that time frame. So was around the time of Lao Tzu. So let me pull up the slide, show you what I mean. The Tao perspective on praise. So we're going beyond self-praise. We're now talking about the praise from all around. What if, as part of your journey as a Tao cultivator, you have accomplished certain things and you begin to get praise from different directions? Is that possible? Well, of course it is. The better you are, the more praise you are likely to receive. How do you tell if the praise is genuine and authentic? Well, that's what we're about to address. This story is about a gentleman by the name of Zhou Ji. He lived in the kingdom of Qi, Qi Guo, and this was back in the days of the Warring States period. In this picture that you see, he is being portrayed by an actor, a good-looking guy who's playing a musical instrument. And that's because historically, this particular figure from history was known as a good-looking man, charismatic, who was very adept with music as well. So this, of course, had an effect on the people around him. And he served the king of Qi as a minister, as a valued and wise minister. So when he stands, people could see that he was tall. This was a tall guy, and this was a good-looking guy. He took pride in that. And one morning, he dressed himself, watching the mirror and reflecting upon his looks. He asked his wife about another man who was also known as a very good-looking man. This was a man by the name of Xu, and the honorary for someone in that position was Gong. So Xu Gong was this other person. So he asked his wife about Xu Gong. He said, "Who is better looking, me or Xu Gong?" His wife said, "Well, of course, you are the most beautiful. How can Xu Gong even compare?" So Zhou Ji, upon hearing this, had some doubts. He had some doubts in his mind. Was this right? Maybe I better get corroboration. So he went to ask his concubine. So back in those days, powerful, wealthy men in ancient China, when the situation allows, they could have multiple concubines, or he had a concubine. So he went to ask his concubine. He asked the same question. So between myself and Xu Gong, who is better looking? So the concubine said, "Well, my lord, how can Xu Gong compare to you? Of course you are better looking." Now, he still wasn't quite satisfied with this. He still had some doubts. And that particular day, he was receiving a guest, a visitor in his home. So this guest came to ask him for favors. And as they were chatting during their talk, he asked his visitor, "So you know that Xu Gong is famous for being a very good-looking man. So who do you think is better, myself or him?" So his visitor replied that, my lord, of course, you are the better looking one. How can Xu Gong compare to you? So it's a very similar answer to the two that he had already received. So upon this validation from the guest, Zhou Qi let the matter rest, at least for the time being. As coincidence would have it, the next day, Xu came to visit with him, had some business to discuss in regards to the kingdom. So as they conversed, Zhou Ji carefully looked at him, and he came to the realization that definitely this man was the better looking one, was much better looking than himself. So in fact, later on, after Xu had left, he looked at himself in the mirror and confirmed that opinion, confirmed that assessment for himself, that he was not really comparable. He couldn't really compare to this really good-looking guy. So he thought about this. This bothered him because his own conclusion was in contradiction with the opinion from his wife, his sister, and his guest from yesterday, from the previous day. Then, tossing and turning at night, he came upon the realization. He realized that, well, my wife said that about me because she loves me. My concubine, comes from such a background of little wealth and power, a background of poverty, that she is actually afraid of me. So she will, of course, tell me what I want to hear. The guest, the visitor who came, said that I was better looking. Well, it's only because he had a request to mate of me. So at some point after that, he, as a minister, was present in the court of the king of Qi, the Qi kingdom. And he conversed with the king. And he was relating this recent experience to the king. And he admitted to the king, Your Majesty, you see, I cannot compare to Xu Gong. But everyone told me the opposite was true. Now I know why. My wife told me that because she loves me. My concubine said that because she's afraid of me. And my guest said the same thing because he's seeking a favor from me. Your Majesty, here's the point. Today, the kingdom of Qi, Qi Guo, is a region spanning thousands of miles. It's a powerful kingdom with 110 castles to defend its borders. In the palace, the ladies and nobles praise you because of the position you have given them. In the court, all your ministers praise you because you have power over them and they fear you. In every direction that you care to look, everyone praises you. The people all praise you because they all want something from you. So, Your Majesty, it seems to me that the deception you face is far greater than my own. The king thought about this and said, You are absolutely correct. Never occurred to me before. So he issued a royal decree. He said that from this point on, anyone, ministers or my subjects, any of my subjects, if anyone can, in my presence, directly to me, point out my problems, I will give them the highest reward. Anyone who has the ability to submit a written criticism of me, I will give them the mid-level reward. anyone who will in public criticize me for the things that I have done wrong, and the word gets to me, I will give them a lower level reward. In these three different ways, anyone will be rewarded for providing the proper criticism rather than praise. So this caused quite a stir within the kingdom. So initially, everybody wanted the rewards. They all came up with things to say. So in the courts at the palace, it was like the market with so many people coming and going to, in front of the king, tell him what he's doing wrong. And even after several months, there were still frequently people coming in to do that exact same thing. So out of all these critical remarks, the king sifted through them and picked the ones that he felt needed the most work. He prioritized them and he worked on them. So all the correct, proper criticisms, they were all accepted by the king himself. So because these issues were being addressed, there's less and less things for people to be critical of. And it improved the kingdom of Qi to such a point that it became even more powerful, to the point that all the neighboring kingdoms during the warring states, they all came to swear fealty to the king of Qi Guo, to recognize Qi Guo, the Qi kingdom, as the foremost among peers. This later on became another example of winning battles without fighting. That is, Qi Guo is able to achieve a position of greatness over other kingdoms, but not by defeating them in battle, but simply by accepting the right criticism. So, a historical account, and as you listen to this, I would like to invite you to apply all of the elements to your own life. That is, as we go through life, we are definitely going to encounter people who praise us. The real question is, why do they praise us? What is the agenda? What is the reason? They may praise us because they love us. You know, what we know in our society, in our cultural background, is that, mom is always going to be a staunch supporter of whatever you do. Why? Because she's mom. She loves you. So you need to take that into account and not let the hype carry you away. There are situations when you get into a powerful position and people fear your power, that they will praise you because of it. So in our society, in our cultural background, we would say that these are the brown nosers. Not to put too fine of a point on it, but these are the people who are praising out of an element of fear. And then lastly, your peers may praise you when they want something from you. They're after something. They have a goal. They have a purpose. When you are able to see that, you will suddenly free yourself from being a slave to praise or positive validation. That people can still say positive or negative things, but the Tao should provide a guidance to you as to the correct way to handle it. So that is the very last point that I needed to make today. It isn't just about self-praise, it's about praise in general. So avoid self-praise and handle praise from others correctly. Having said that, we are ready for the paraphrase. So our purpose, once again, is to demonstrate complete understanding by expressing the original in our own words. Modern English is the whole idea. So let's tackle section 1. And this is about tiptoes and straddling. Those who stand on tiptoes cannot do so for long, and those who stand with legs wide apart cannot walk. In the same way, those who try to raise their profile cannot keep it up indefinitely, and those who do too much to attract attention cannot make progress in life. So that's the first section. Let's go to the second and the main section. The more people try to make themselves seem special, the more they achieve the very opposite. The one who shows off ends up just like all other show-offs and cannot be seen clearly. The one who tries to impress others as a know-it-all ends up looking like a know-nothing. The one who tries to take all the credit and praise ends up with little credit and no praise. The one who brags about himself ends up exposed as a braggart. This is the pattern that egotism follows in the world. It always fails and never lasts. And I think we're now ready for the final section of 24, the concluding section. Those who study the authentic Tao understand how excessive pride leads to failure. They look at arrogance as being no different from garbage or tumor, something that should be regarded with complete contempt. They will know that they have mastered the Tao when they no longer engage in the egocentric behavior of flaunting, presuming, self-praising, and boasting. So here we are. That's the paraphrase for 24. So I think we're ready for the summary. So we have about 5 minutes left. That's just about the right amount of time for the summary. In today's summary, I want to highlight the most important points, the 4 signs of egotism. Let me first caution everyone that there's a difference between egoism and egotism. They're spelled a little bit differently. Egoism is a philosophy that springs from the concept of the self. Egotism is when you're egotistical or when your ego gets out of control. So what we call arrogance, being prideful, hubris, etc. So that's what we're talking about here. Let's go ahead and bring up the 4 signs of egotism. I want to use this as a reminder for everyone as you go through your daily life. I hope that these will be a reminder to keep you from engaging in those kinds of behaviors that as a Tao cultivator you should regard as garbage or tumor. So number 1, no real surprises here. It's the flaunting, it's all the other stuff that we have just talked about. So let's start with let's start with flaunting. You are irreplaceable to your loved ones for who you are, but not to society for what you do. So definitely irreplaceable to family and loved ones just for being who you are, but you are not irreplaceable. You are very replaceable to society at large for what you do. And that's because there are so many people out there with so many talented people who can pick up what you do and do the job that you have done and thought was uniquely your own. Number 2, presumption. Presumption is about those who presume themselves as being correct and therefore challenge other people on debates or impose their opinions on other people. Presumption. Do the research to strengthen your position without trying to impose it on others. So the right behavior for Tao cultivators is to figure out what's really going on. It isn't true that Tao cultivators have no opinions. They have strongly held beliefs. They have sound foundations for the beliefs that they have, but they don't feel the need to express that unless they're prompted, unless they're asked. If they're asked about their opinions, they are certainly not shy about expressing those opinions. So their position can be very strong, and yet you will never know it if you didn't ask them, because they never try to impose it on anybody. Number 3, praise, what we just went through. Not praising yourself is the starting point. Go further and master dealing with praise from others. That is the point from the story that you have just heard from the warring states, the kingdom of Qi Guo. Lastly, boasting. So remember, the way that I categorized it, I made number 4 similar to number 2 because they spring from the same impulse in the ego to challenge other people. So Tao cultivators will focus instead on doing the work on your own authentic power to build up that authentic power. And there's no need to exercise that power as a way to dominate other people. In fact, the more you build on your own power and cultivate it, the less of a need that you will have to contend against anyone. So there's no need to brag about it or to challenge other people.
Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Let us travel safely. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.